I used to believe that love meant sacrifice, that keeping quiet was the price you paid to keep a family together. But silence has a cost, and mine nearly erased me from my own life. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about what happens when kindness is mistaken for weakness, and how I finally said, enough. Let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Aurora, a 28-year-old digital marketer at a creative agency in Seattle, Washington. When I decided to purchase my first home last year, I never expected that the decision would eventually leave me juggling the roles of both caretaker and landlord for my parents. My parents, Hector, 65, and Gloria, 63, spent most of their lives as dedicated librarians in a quiet town near Spokane. After retiring, they craved a change, a desire to be closer to me, and to experience the vibrant rhythm of city life. I welcomed the idea. With an annual income north of $130,000, I felt confident I could manage the financial side of things while giving them a worry-free place to live. As an only child, I always knew it was my turn to repay their decades of sacrifices by providing for them. I ended up buying a modest yet charming two-story house nestled in the historic Fremont neighborhood. It wasn't extravagant by any means, but it was comfortably spacious. The home featured 3 well-proportioned rooms, a small but inviting backyard, and a living area large enough to host family dinners and lively gatherings. I claimed the master suite as my personal retreat, while taking full responsibility for every expense, from the mortgage and utilities to the groceries and even regular cleaning services. Understanding my work-from-home needs, I converted one of the rooms into a dedicated home office. Since nearly 80% of my work was remote, having a quiet, organized space to focus was non-negotiable. I set up the office with 2 large monitors, an ergonomic chair, a desk lamp that offered soft, comforting light, and a small bookshelf filled with digital marketing guides and creative reference books. This little haven provided a necessary escape from the busy pulse of the city outside. The third room was arranged as a guest space, furnished with a fold-out sofa, a bedside lamp, and a sturdy wooden wardrobe crafted from reclaimed timber. Occasionally, distant relatives or close family friends would drop by and stay over, but more often than not, the room quietly awaited its next purpose. For a while, everything seemed to run smoothly. I shouldered all the expenses and household management, while Hector and Gloria enjoyed their mornings tending to the garden, watching classic films, and sometimes indulging in an afternoon baking session. In that balanced routine, I felt a strong sense of accomplishment and familial unity. I'll never forget the day my father remarked on our new living situation. "This place gives the vibe of an upscale boutique hotel," he said with a twinkle in his eyes. I laughed, taking it as a compliment, a sign that I had successfully created a comfortable space for all of us. Little did I know that a few months later, their perception of entitlement would begin to shift the dynamics of our home. The change started one quiet Sunday afternoon. I was absorbed in some work in my home office when my mother gently knocked on the door, holding a steaming cup of peppermint tea, a familiar gesture that usually brought comfort. "Dear," she began softly, "there's something important we need to discuss." I set my pen down and looked up, noticing an unusual seriousness in her expression. "Have you heard from your cousin Vivian lately?" she asked. "She's hit a rough patch. Her relationship has ended and she's expecting a baby. They might need a temporary place to stay until things get back on track." My heart pounded as a mixture of concern and anxiety took hold. I had been aware of Vivian's challenges for a few weeks, but never had I imagined that our home would soon need to accommodate additional family members. At that moment, I realized that the delicate balance of responsibilities and boundaries we had all worked so hard to establish was about to be tested in unforeseen ways. As I sat there contemplating the new reality, I wondered if I could manage the increasing demands without upsetting the harmony we had all once enjoyed. With a deep breath, I prepared myself for the challenging conversation ahead, one where love, fairness, and the complexities of family obligations would all be put to the test. "Well, probably the guest room," Mom said, her smile a bit too quick. "Or if you wouldn't mind rearranging a little." I stared at her. "Mom, this is my house. Something that important? You should have talked to me first." She blinked, then gave a half shrug. "I just thought, we're family. You'd understand." I didn't answer right away. My jaw clenched as sympathy tangled with something sharper, unease. I didn't want to be heartless, Vivian was my cousin and she was pregnant. But it wasn't just about kindness anymore. It was about being asked, not cornered. 2 days later, I came home from running errands to find a mountain of suitcases by the entryway and Vivian's voice echoing through the kitchen. My heart sank. "Hey, Aurora," my mom called. "Vivian got in this morning. I was going to tell you tonight." I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Great," I said flatly. I didn't even greet Vivian. I just walked upstairs and shut the door like I was trying to seal myself into the only place I still had control over. That moment marked a quiet shift in our house. And not a good one. Vivian and her ex-boyfriend's drama followed her in like a storm cloud. She took long speakerphone calls with her girlfriends at the kitchen table, laughing loudly while I tried to concentrate in my office just a wall away. The fridge became a revolving door. Every time I went to grab my lunch, the leftovers were gone. Granola bars? Vanished. Sparkling water? Empty cans in the recycling bin. And the TV in the living room? Claimed. Hector and Gloria had once watched black and white mysteries together in the evenings. Now Vivian sprawled on the couch watching reality shows, and my dad had migrated back to his bedroom to read alone. I tried to be patient. I brought it up gently to Mom. "I think maybe it's time Vivian started helping with the groceries. I can't keep footing the bill for everyone." She gave me a look. "They're going through a hard time, Mija. You're not exactly struggling." That stung. Not because it wasn't true I was financially stable, but because the expectation was clear. My success meant I owed them more. Unlimited support, unquestioned generosity. Saturday night I was brushing my teeth when there was a light knock on my door. It was Vivian. She stood there with her hands cradling her belly, her voice soft. "Hey, are you still up? I just wanted to ask something." I nodded, toothbrush still in hand. She hesitated. "I know this is your house, but would you be willing to switch rooms with us? Just for a few months? The master bedroom has better light and more space. It would help so much with the baby." I lowered my toothbrush and stared. That room was my sanctuary. The one part of the house that still felt like mine. I swallowed hard. "Vivian, I think you're asking too much." She blinked, clearly not expecting pushback. "Oh, I just thought." "I know what you thought." I cut in gently. "But I need that space to stay mine." I thought that would be the end of it. But the following week I began hearing whispers. Not real whispers, comments disguised as jokes. "Man, that master bedroom's huge," Vivian said loudly one morning. "Even with a crib it wouldn't feel cramped at all. I should have called dibs before Aurora moved in." She laughed another day. It wasn't subtle. And it wasn't innocent. That was when I realized. People don't always need to own a house to try and take it from you. Sometimes they just need to feel entitled enough to act like they already do. "Huh," I muttered, stunned. We were all sitting at the dinner table when Vivian suddenly said, "That big bathtub in your room would be perfect for bathing the baby. The guest room just doesn't get enough sunlight." I looked to Mom, expecting her to speak up, maybe remind Vivian that the master bedroom wasn't hers to comment on. But instead she just smiled, scooped another spoonful of greens onto Vivian's plate, and smoothly changed the subject. It hit me then. I was living in a scene I hadn't rehearsed. Everyone else seemed to know their parts, reciting their lines with ease, while I sat there silent, waiting for a cue that never came. The following Monday I had a client presentation downtown. Normally I work from home, but this was a big account and I needed to be out all day. I left early that morning, mentally rehearsing the pitch. Before I stepped out I locked my bedroom door like I always did. Though in my haste, I forgot to slide the inner bolt. By the time I got home around 6 p.m., something felt wrong. The lights in the hallway were dim. The usual noise from the TV was reduced to a quiet hum. I walked slowly, the heels of my shoes tapping the hardwood as I climbed the stairs. That's when I froze. My dresser, was sitting in the hallway. My heart thudded in my chest. I rushed up the final steps, already fearing the worst. My bedroom door was closed but not locked. My hand trembled as I pushed it open. Everything was different. My quilt, pillows, and linens? Gone. A baby crib now sat dead center in the room. On the walls, a few ultrasound photos had been taped up without care. My vanity had been shoved haphazardly into a corner, nearly blocked by diaper boxes. The closet door stood wide open, and many of my clothes were missing from the hangers. And there she was, Vivian, sitting on my bed. My bed. Calmly folding baby towels like she owned the place. She looked up at me with zero concern. Not guilt. Not surprise. Just casual acknowledgement. "Oh hey, you're back," she said lightly. "I was just finishing up." I stared at her, stunned. What is going on here?" "Oh, didn't Mom tell you?" she said. "She said we could move into this room. It just makes more sense with the baby and all. You can take your office. I already started moving your things." I could barely breathe. My chest tightened. I turned on my heel and stormed downstairs. Mom was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup like it was just another day. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "You let Vivian into my room without asking me." She flinched, just barely, then quickly set the spoon down. "I was going to tell you," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "But you were busy today. And, well, Vivian's pregnant. She and the baby need the space more than you do right now. You already have the office." I clenched my fists. "You know this is my house, right?" I said, the edge in my voice rising. "Every single dollar that pays for this place comes from me. I've never asked you for a thing. And now I'm being treated like I'm in the way." Mom sighed, looking away. "You don't have to do this, Aurora. We're family. I just hoped you'd understand for a while." But I didn't respond. I just stood there staring at her, a deep ache settling into my chest. This wasn't about helping anymore. This was about being erased in my own home. Vivian hadn't even needed to ask. Someone else answered for her. Someone who should have defended me. That night I didn't yell. I didn't scream. But something inside me hardened. Because now I knew. When you don't set clear boundaries, someone will always cross the line for you. And they'll do it with a smile. I didn't slam a door. I didn't yell. But the second I stepped out of the room that had been mine, my sanctuary, I knew one thing for certain. My silence would never again be mistaken for permission. That night, I unrolled an old camping mat in the corner of my office. My expensive ergonomic chair, the one that had supported me through countless deadlines and late-night brainstorms, was now shoved off to the side like a piece of forgotten furniture. I lay down on the thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, not because of the discomfort, but because of the heat building inside me. A slow simmering rage. I didn't sleep much. By morning my mind was already made up. I walked into the kitchen like a ghost. The house was quiet, too quiet. On the table, I saw the usual signs of a finished breakfast. Dirty dishes, used napkins, glasses with the last sips of orange juice still clinging to the bottom. But where my place usually sat was nothing. No plate. No coffee mug. No fork. Just an empty space that somehow said everything. I stood there for a moment, then opened the fridge. The chicken I'd cooked for meal prep? Gone. So was the almond milk I used in my morning smoothies. In their place were new items. Some trendy brand of kombucha, gluten-free bagels, a jar of imported almond butter, none of which I bought. None of which I ever bought. I turned to see Mom sitting at the island, casually chatting with Vivian. "We should probably find a nice frame for that ultrasound photo," she said sweetly, passing Vivian a sliced pear. Not a glance in my direction. Not a word to acknowledge me. They didn't have to kick me out of my own house. All they had to do was pretend I didn't exist. That night, I sat on the floor of my office with a cup of instant noodles in one hand and my laptop in the other. And I started researching. Washington state property laws. Rights of homeowners. Legal eviction protocols for residents without a lease. I read every footnote. Cross-checked every clause. Not because I wanted a war, but because I refused to be erased. I spent hours drafting 2 formal notices. Clear, concise, and legally sound. One addressed to Vivian. One to my parents. I printed them, signed them, and slid them into transparent envelopes. I didn't flinch. My hands didn't shake. I felt focused, calm, resolved. The next morning it was raining. A light, misty rain that whispered against the windows. I waited until the hallway was quiet. Then I stepped into the living room. Vivian was lounging on the couch, barefoot, her legs stretched across the coffee table. She had a bag of popcorn in one hand and the remote in the other. Mark was beside her, scrolling through his phone like he was killing time in an airport lounge. I didn't say a word. I placed the 2 envelopes on the table in front of them. Vivian looked up and raised an eyebrow. What's this? I met her gaze. It's a formal notice. You both have 30 days to move out of my house. After that, I'll proceed with legal action. She blinked. Aurora, seriously? I'm pregnant. Don't you think this is a little harsh? I clenched my jaw. No. What's harsh is barging into someone else's home, living off them without asking, without helping, and treating them like a stranger in their own space. Being pregnant doesn't give you the right to disregard someone's boundaries. Vivian's lips pressed into a line, her confidence clearly shaken. Before she could respond, Mark jumped in. Did you even talk to your mom about this? Just then I heard footsteps. Mom stepped out of the hallway, still drying her hands on a dish towel. She glanced at the envelopes on the table, then looked at me. Her face dropped. You're kicking your own family out? I didn't blink. If this family treats me like I'm not part of it, if my voice, my space, and my efforts don't count, then don't expect to stay here as family. For a moment, no one said anything. The TV played softly in the background, filling the silence with meaningless sound. But I didn't care. I had finally spoken up, and I wasn't backing down. No one said a word. The silence in the room was tight, tense like a string pulled so hard it might snap. My mom slowly lowered her gaze to the floor. Vivian flushed a deep red, and Mark slapped his hand against his thigh with frustration before storming out of the room without a word. That night, I locked the office door as tightly as I could and left a 3rd envelope on the small wooden table in my parents' room. 30 days. If nothing changed by then, I would file for legal eviction. I wasn't bluffing and I wasn't afraid anymore. I curled up on the floor, knees to chest, cold not from the temperature, but from the weight of finally choosing myself. There's a cost to standing your ground. You lose comfort. You lose approval. You might even lose people. But you gain something far more important. Self-respect. I didn't need them to understand me anymore. I just needed them to hear me. The next morning I was up before sunrise. I brewed coffee in silence, the steam rising in soft ribbons as dawn crept through the blinds. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't angry. I was resolved. I walked to the 2nd floor, stopping at the door that once led to my bedroom. Now, taped onto it in pastel letters was a sign that read, Baby Elliot's room. I knocked 3 times. Vivian opened the door in an oversized t-shirt, her hair tangled from sleep. Her eyes narrowed as she registered my presence, and the thick file folder I held in my hand. What's this? She asked, her voice hoarse. This, I said, extending the folder toward her, is your final notice. You have 24 hours to vacate the property. If not, I will file a forced eviction through the police. Her mouth dropped open. For a moment she didn't move. Then her expression crumpled like paper, and tears welled in her eyes. You're serious? She whispered. You're actually kicking out a pregnant woman? I stared at her evenly. Not a pregnant woman, I said. A woman who crossed every boundary and claimed what wasn't hers. I turned and walked away, unmoved by the quiet sobs that followed me down the stairs. I wasn't cold. I was exhausted. Exhausted from emotion being weaponized. From guilt being used like a leash. Halfway down the staircase, Mark burst out of the kitchen like thunder. His eyes were wild, and he still had half a sandwich clenched in one hand. Are you insane? He yelled. Vivian is pregnant. Do you seriously have no heart? I didn't flinch. I calmly placed the file folder on the table and looked him in the eyes. Yes, she's pregnant. But that doesn't entitle either of you to take my bed, eat the food I pay for, or pretend I don't exist in my own home. You're here because I allowed it. And now that allowance is over. Mark's face twisted in rage. He hurled the rest of his sandwich onto the floor. If you call the cops, I swear. I raised my hand. I installed security cameras around the house last week, I said. Every threat, every outburst, it's all recorded. His face turned pale. That afternoon, my mom returned from the grocery store. She stepped inside, juggling a bag of produce, and froze when she saw the scene. Vivian sat on the stairs, face buried in her hands, crying. I sat in the living room with a cup of tea, quiet and composed. Mom rushed forward, dropping the grocery bag with a thud. What happened? She cried. Vivian, what's wrong? Vivian looked up, her eyes red. Aurora gave us 24 hours to leave, she sobbed. Please talk to her. We don't even know where we'll go. I stood calm and steady. Mom, I've already given everyone a warning. This isn't about feelings anymore. This is about respect. This is about boundaries. I'm not going to be ignored in my own house. She turned to me, slowly walked over and gently took my hand. Aurora, don't do this, my mother pleaded, her voice soft and fraying at the edges. Please. You've always been the most generous person I know. Don't let this tear us apart. Don't turn this family into enemies. I looked at her, this woman who used to scoop me into her arms after scraped knees and playground heartbreaks, the one who used to sit by my bed when I had nightmares. And yet here she was, defending the very people who had disrespected every boundary I had drawn. Mom, I said, my voice steady but tired. I have been generous. For 3 months. I gave them my space, my food, my time without ever asking for anything back. But I won't keep sacrificing myself for a family that doesn't respect me. That's not generosity. That's neglecting myself. That night, the silence in the house was different. It wasn't just uncomfortable, it was fractured. No one gathered at the dining table. Vivian lay across the couch with her forearm draped over her eyes like she was shielding herself from the world. Mark slammed the guest room door as I passed by on my way to the kitchen. My mom just sat at the dining table, unmoving, staring out the window as if hoping the night could offer her an answer she hadn't found in me. I ate alone. A slice of leftover grilled salmon and a glass of water. No noise, no conversation. Just the quiet rhythm of a fork against a plate. But for the first time in weeks, maybe months, my mind was calm. I had once feared conflict, believing it meant I was cruel or cold. But I had learned something more frightening. Losing yourself by staying silent too long. The next morning, the clock blinked 7 a.m. I had just finished placing a plate of toast and scrambled eggs on the table when I heard the unmistakable thud of a suitcase bumping down the stairs. Mark, dragging one oversized roller bag behind him. Vivian followed, her face puffy from crying, her hair tucked sloppily under a hood. They didn't say anything. They didn't glance at me. I stood near the door, still holding my coffee mug. Mom trailed behind them, her face complicated. Not angry. Not sad. Just tangled. As Mark heaved the bags into the back of their SUV, Vivian paused near the doorway. Her voice was small, cracking at the edges. You've really changed, Aurora. I didn't flinch. I have, I said. I've learned to protect myself from what crosses the line. The SUV pulled away from the curb at exactly 4:12 p.m. I remember the time not because I was watching, but because I had been standing in the kitchen for nearly an hour, not waiting. Just confirming it was done. No one waved. No one looked back. They left the way they'd arrived, quiet, uninvited, and unapologetic. And then the house exhaled. The noise disappeared. The living room was finally still. No TV echoing through the halls, no trail of crumbs on the couch cushions. No more long, bossy requests from the kitchen. Just stillness. Just space. That night, I brought my dinner upstairs, a bowl of rice and steamed vegetables, and sat on the bed I had reclaimed. The soft golden lamp cast a warm glow over the room. My framed photo of Grandma, always smiling, sat in its old place on the vanity. This was my room again. My home. And after months of feeling displaced in my own life, it was finally my peace too. Around 10 p.m., a gentle knock sounded at my door. I didn't rush to answer it. Instead, I took a breath and said softly, "It's not locked." Mom stepped in slowly, her favorite old shawl draped over her shoulders, the one she always worked on when her thoughts were too loud. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped, her eyes distant. A long silence passed before she asked, "Are you still angry at me?" I looked at her. The face I had known my whole life looked older tonight, not from time, but from the quiet weight of truth settling in. "No, Mom," I said gently. "Not angry. Just disappointed." She nodded, her gaze locked on the floor. "I thought helping one of my children was the right thing to do," she murmured. "But I forgot, when you protect one, you might end up wounding the other." I didn't speak. I let her keep going. "I'm sorry, Aurora," she said slowly, as if each word cost her something. "I'm sorry for not standing by you. For putting so much weight on your shoulders without even realizing it. You were the one holding this house together, And I let that slip away from me. I set the tea tray down on the nightstand and turned to face her fully. You know, Mom, I said, my voice low but steady, I never asked you or Dad to leave. That's not what I wanted. I bought this house in part so you could both have security. I imagined a future where we could live together in peace. She looked up. But if I'm just a bank account, if I'm just the one who keeps quiet and pays for everything while being expected to absorb everyone else's decisions, then I'd rather live alone. Her eyes watered, but she didn't argue. She simply nodded, her voice soft. I won't let that happen again. Promise. No one will ever make decisions for you in this house again. You have my word. For the first time in a long time, I heard sincerity in her voice. Not obligation, not guilt, but truth. I gave her a small nod. We can keep living together, Mom. But it has to be with boundaries. Clear ones. No more assumptions that silence means yes. There has to be mutual respect. I understand, she said, her tone gentler than I'd heard in weeks. And I'll talk to your father. We won't let you carry this alone anymore. The next morning, something small nearly made me laugh. A note folded in half, left on the dining table. On the outside, my name in Dad's familiar scratchy handwriting. Inside. Did you eat yet, sweetheart? Your mom made pancakes. There's orange juice in the fridge. No grand apology. No dramatic gesture. Just something simple, something unmistakably him. I didn't need more than that. They were trying, and for the first time in a long while I felt like maybe, just maybe, it was real. When Vivian and Mark pulled out of the driveway, I thought that would be the end of the storm. But it wasn't. It was the beginning of something else entirely. Not peace exactly, but honesty. A restart, not a retreat. I've never been someone who enjoys winning. I wasn't looking to dominate or humiliate anyone. But I finally understood that some battles aren't about being right. They're about not disappearing inside other people's needs. Drafting eviction papers for my cousin was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But not doing it would have meant losing myself. Respect, I've learned, is a lot like love. It can't survive where there are no boundaries. About a week later, Mom knocked gently on my door in the evening. When I said, "Come in," she entered holding an old, thick photo album. We sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through pages that smelled faintly of dust and childhood. There I was, maybe 6, wearing a red t-shirt and sitting on her lap with a wide, missing teeth grin. Then another. Dad guiding my bike down the street outside our old house, sunlight catching in my helmet. A Christmas photo from years ago. Vivian and I hugging beside a paper tree taped to the wall, both of us giggling. We didn't say much. But the way she handled those pages, the way her fingers paused at each photo, as if afraid they might break the past, told me everything. She was starting over too. I don't want to be apart from this family, I said softly. I just don't want any of us to trade our dignity just to belong. Mom was quiet for a long moment, then reached out and gently held my hand. From now on, she whispered, no one will have to trade anything. And for the first time in months I believed her. I promise, Mom had said. And for once I believed it. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe Vivian will never call me again. Maybe Mark will always see me as the heartless cousin who kicked them out. And maybe, just maybe, someday we'll all sit down, no longer driven by guilt or pride, and talk like the people we used to be. People who once hurt each other, but who might finally learn how to heal. But whatever happens, I'll be the one who sets the line from now on. Not to keep people out, but to protect the space where love and respect can grow again. Because I've learned something through all of this, something I feel deep in my bones now. Family isn't a license to hurt without consequence. And if it can't be a place of healing, it should never be the source of new wounds. That night, for the first time in a long while, I set my phone down without waiting for a text or an apology. I turned off the light. I didn't scroll, didn't rehearse arguments in my head, didn't replay the past in loops of what-ifs. I just lay there, still, quiet, whole. And I knew I had made the right choice. Even if it meant facing the hardest thing of all, drawing a firm line with the people I love most, I would do it again. Without hesitation. Because freedom doesn't begin when you leave a place. It begins the moment you stay in your own home, your own truth, and say, that's enough. Aurora's story isn't just about one family. It's a reminder that unchecked kindness can become a doorway to being used. And that love without limits can quietly erode our sense of self. In real life, it's often the people closest to us who test our boundaries the most. That's why speaking up, no matter how hard, is the first and most powerful step in reclaiming our voice, our space, and our dignity. Because family without fairness isn't family at all. What do you think about Aurora's decision? Would you have handled things differently? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more real stories about family, boundaries, and choosing self-respect over silence.